A tomb guard spots a combat veteran's ghost, but then something miraculous happens. At first, it seems like a haunting, a uniformed spirit pacing the shadows of Arlington Cemetery, pointing silently at the graves. But what starts as a chilling encounter quickly spirals into something far more terrifying and far more real. A troubled night guard, still tormented by the lives he couldn't save, finds himself being guided, not haunted, by the ghost of a fallen soldier. The soldier isn't here to scare anyone, but why does the ghost keep returning? Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances, backgrounds, and hearts. If values like respect, courage, and compassion still guide you, then you're part of this story too. The autumn wind whistled through the silent rows of white headstones at Arlington National Cemetery. Caleb Hutchins pulled his security guard jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked his usual patrol route, his flashlight beam sweeping across the perfectly aligned markers that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. His footsteps crunched on the gravel path as memories from his EMT days flooded back. The screams, the thick smoke, the desperate faces in the windows of that burning apartment building. He shook his head, trying to focus on his current task. 3 years had passed since that tragic night, but the weight of those he couldn't save still pressed heavy on his heart. At least here they're already at peace, Caleb muttered to himself, finding bitter comfort in his new role watching over the fallen. The quiet of the cemetery usually helped calm his troubled thoughts, but tonight felt different. The air seemed charged like the stillness before a storm. As he rounded the corner into Section 60, his flashlight beam caught something that made him freeze mid-step. Through the darkness, a figure stood between the rows of headstones, a soldier in full-dress uniform. But something was wrong. The figure seemed to glow with a faint bluish light, and Caleb could see the headstones through the man's translucent form. "Hey!" Caleb called out, his voice cracking. "This area is closed to visitors." The soldier turned slowly to face him. His features were sharp and clear despite his ghostly appearance. A young man with a proud bearing and determined eyes. The name tag on his uniform read, Delacroix. The spirit, Caleb couldn't deny what he was seeing, raised his arm and pointed urgently toward a specific section of graves. Caleb's hands trembled as he lifted his flashlight. "This can't be real," he whispered, but the figure remained, continuing to point with increasing urgency. The ghost's expression was pleading now, desperate to communicate something important. Taking a hesitant step forward, Caleb tried to steady his racing heart. Years of EMT training kicked in. Assess the situation, stay calm, look for signs. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. "What are you trying to show me?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The spirit of Staff Sergeant Delacroix, Caleb could now clearly see his rank insignia, moved closer, his transparent form gliding over the grass without touching it. The ghost's features became more distinct as he approached. There was something noble in his bearing, the kind of dignity that came from a life of service. His uniform was immaculate, decorations gleaming on his chest, including what appeared to be a Congressional Medal of Honor. Caleb's feet felt rooted to the spot as the spirit drew near. The air around him grew cold enough to see his breath, forming small clouds in the autumn night. The ghost stopped just a few feet away, still pointing insistently at a particular row of graves. "You want me to go there?" Caleb asked, fighting against the urge to run. The spirit nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on Caleb with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through him. Drawing upon the courage that had once led him into burning buildings, Caleb took a deep breath and stepped forward. But as he moved toward the indicated spot, the ghost of Liam Delacroix began to fade. "Wait!" Caleb called out, but it was too late. The spectral figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving only a lingering chill in the air and the echo of urgency in Caleb's mind. Standing alone among the headstones, Caleb ran his flashlight over the area where the ghost had pointed. His hands were still shaking, making the beam dance erratically across the white markers. The enormity of what he'd just witnessed crashed over him in waves. "I've seen a lot of things," he said aloud, trying to ground himself in the moment. "But this..." He trailed off, remembering all the times he'd had to stay focused during emergencies. This was different, but the same principles applied. Someone needed help, even if that someone was no longer among the living. The memory of his failure during the apartment fire threatened to overwhelm him again. The faces of those he couldn't reach, the weight of responsibility, the crushing guilt, it all came rushing back. But this time something was different. The ghost of Staff Sergeant Delacroix had chosen him, had reached out to him specifically. Maybe, Caleb thought, his breathing steadying as a new sense of purpose began to take hold. This is why I'm here. Maybe this is my chance to make things right. He stood straighter, squaring his shoulders as he surveyed the section of graves where the spirit had pointed. Whatever message Staff Sergeant Delacroix was trying to convey, whatever wrong needed to be righted, Caleb knew he had to see it through. He owed it to the fallen soldier, to the sacred ground he was charged with protecting, and to himself. The wind picked up again, rustling through the trees and carrying with it the weight of responsibility. Caleb gripped his flashlight tighter, its beam steady now as he began to examine the area more closely. The ghost may have vanished, but its urgent message remained, along with a growing certainty in Caleb's heart that his past as an EMT, his current role as a security guard, and this supernatural encounter were all connected in ways he had yet to understand. For the next 3 nights, Caleb's patrols followed the same unsettling pattern. Each time he entered Section 60, the ghostly figure of Staff Sergeant Delacroix would appear, his translucent form glowing against the dark backdrop of Arlington's endless rows of white markers. "I must be losing it," Caleb muttered on the second night, rubbing his tired eyes as the spirit materialized once again. Too many overnight shifts, too much coffee, too many memories. But the apparition remained, more agitated than before, pointing repeatedly at the same cluster of graves. By the third night, the ghost's gestures had become frantic. Delacroix's spectral form moved with increased urgency, his otherworldly presence radiating distress. His transparent hands gestured wildly toward the graves, his face twisted with concern. Caleb tried to rationalize the experiences away. Stress-induced hallucinations, he told himself while sitting in the security office during his break. That's all this is. The anniversary of the apartment fire is coming up. My mind is playing tricks on me. He pulled out his phone and searched for articles about grief-related hallucinations, trying to find a logical explanation for what he was seeing. But on the 4th night, something changed. The ghost appeared closer than ever before, its features sharp and clear in the moonlight. Caleb could see every detail of the military dress uniform, every medal and decoration, even the name tag that read Delacroix in perfect clarity. The spirit's eyes locked with his, filled with an intelligence and purpose that no hallucination could possess. "This is real," Caleb whispered, his hands trembling as he lowered his flashlight. "You're really here, aren't you?" The ghost nodded slowly, deliberately, before pointing once again at the graves. Caleb's EMT training had taught him to trust his instincts, to recognize when something didn't add up. This was no trick of an exhausted mind. The temperature drops, the consistent appearances, the clear purpose in the spirit's actions. It all pointed to something genuine, something that demanded attention. Back in the security office, Caleb logged into the cemetery's database. His fingers moved across the keyboard, typing in the name he'd seen on the ghost's uniform. The search returned a single result. Staff Sergeant Liam Delacroix, killed in action 3 years ago while saving his unit from an ambush. "A hero," Caleb murmured, scanning the service record. Multiple commendations, a distinguished career, and buried with full military honors. Among his possessions interred with him was his grandfather's Congressional Medal of Honor, a family legacy of service and sacrifice. The more Caleb read, the more real Liam Delacroix became. Not just a spirit in the night, but a man who had lived, served, and died protecting others. The rational part of Caleb's mind continued to resist, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. He printed out Delacroix's file and spread the papers across his desk. Service photos showed a proud soldier with kind eyes and a determined set to his jaw. The same features Caleb had seen in the ghost's transparent face. The location of the grave matched exactly where the spirit appeared each night. "Okay, Sergeant Delacroix," Caleb said to the empty office. "I hear you. You're trying to tell me something important about your grave." He ran his hands through his hair, remembering how many times as an EMT he'd had to trust his gut, to believe what he was seeing even when it seemed impossible. The next night, Caleb arrived at his shift with a new sense of purpose. He no longer feared the ghost's appearance. Instead, he waited for it, ready to acknowledge the truth before him. When Liam materialized among the headstones, Caleb stepped forward with determination. "Staff Sergeant Liam Delacroix," he said clearly, watching as the spirit's eyes widened in recognition. "I know who you are now. I know about your service, your sacrifice." Caleb took another step closer. "I'm ready to listen. What are you trying to show me?" The ghost's expression shifted from surprise to relief. His pointing became more focused, more specific. He moved to stand directly over his own grave marker, his transparent form illuminating the engraved name and dates. Caleb's past as an EMT had taught him that sometimes the most important messages came from those who couldn't speak. He'd learned to read faces, body language, subtle signs that indicated distress or urgency. Now, facing the spirit of a fallen soldier, he applied those same observation skills. "Your grave," Caleb said slowly, watching the ghost's reactions. "Something's wrong with your grave." The spirit nodded emphatically, its form brightening. "And you need my help to make it right." The acceptance of this supernatural reality didn't come easily to Caleb. His mind still fought against it, still tried to find rational explanations. But as he stood there in the quiet cemetery, watching the ghostly figure of Liam Delacroix hover over his own final resting place, he knew he had crossed a line. There was no going back to simple explanations or comfortable denials. "I failed to save lives once," Caleb said quietly, thinking of the apartment fire that had ended his EMT career. "I won't fail you, Sergeant. Whatever you're trying to tell me, I'll figure it out. You have my word." The ghost of Liam Delacroix stood at attention, offering a solemn salute before fading into the night air. Caleb returned the salute, his decision made. The time for doubt was over. Something was wrong in Arlington National Cemetery, and a fallen hero needed his help to make it right. The following night, Caleb returned to Liam's grave with a small notebook and flashlight. The ghost appeared right on schedule, more insistent than ever. This time, instead of just pointing, Liam moved among the surrounding headstones, his spectral form illuminating specific areas of disturbed ground. Caleb knelt down to examine the soil where Liam indicated. At first glance, everything looked normal, but his trained eye caught subtle irregularities. Years of emergency response work had taught him to notice details others might miss. The grass appeared slightly uneven, with patches that didn't quite match the surrounding turf. "Someone's been digging here," he muttered, running his fingers over the ground. The soil felt loose, different from the firmly packed earth that should have settled over years. He moved his flashlight beam slowly across the area, noting similar disturbances near other graves. Liam's ghost nodded vigorously, pointing to more locations. Caleb followed, documenting each spot in his notebook. He found boot prints partially hidden by scattered leaves, places where the grass had been carefully lifted and replaced, and even a small piece of black fabric caught on a nearby bush. "This isn't random," Caleb whispered, his heart racing as the pattern became clear. "These are all graves of decorated veterans." He looked up at Liam, whose transparent features reflected a mix of sadness and determination. Someone's been excavating these graves in secret. The discovery turned his stomach. As a former EMT, he'd seen his share of disturbing scenes, but the deliberate desecration of soldiers' final resting places struck him as particularly wrong. These men and women had given everything for their country, and now someone was violating their peace. When his shift ended at 6 in the morning, Caleb waited in the security office for Harold Brennan, his supervisor, to arrive. The middle-aged man walked in at 7 o'clock sharp, carrying a large coffee in a travel mug that Caleb noticed was from an expensive coffee chain. "Mr. Brennan, I need to report something serious," Caleb said, spreading out his notebook on the desk. "I've found evidence of unauthorized excavation in Section 60. Multiple graves show signs of being tampered with." Brennan's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Show me what you found," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Caleb pointed to his detailed notes and rough sketches of the disturbed areas. "Here and here. The soil's been recently disturbed. Someone's trying to hide their digging, but the signs are clear if you know what to look for. And it's not animals, these are deliberate excavations." "That's a serious accusation," Brennan said, his tone growing cold. "Are you sure you're not just seeing things? Working nights can play tricks on your mind." "Sir, I documented everything," Caleb insisted. "We need to report this to the authorities. These are veterans' graves we're talking about." Brennan's expression hardened. "Listen carefully, Hutchins. You're new here. You don't understand how things work." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Arlington gets all kinds of conspiracy theorists and troublemakers. We don't need that kind of attention." "But sir—" "Drop it," Brennan snapped. "Unless you want to find yourself looking for another job. Security guards who can't keep their imagination in check don't last long here." The threat was unmistakable. Caleb sat back, studying his supervisor with new eyes. Brennan's clothes, which had always seemed ordinary, suddenly registered as surprisingly expensive. The gold watch on his wrist looked new, and Caleb remembered the gleaming black truck he'd seen Brennan driving lately, a far cry from the old sedan he'd had just months ago. "Is that understood?" Brennan demanded. "Yes, sir," Caleb said quietly, watching as his supervisor gathered up his notes and dropped them into the shredder beside the desk. "Good. Now get out of here. And Hutchins," Brennan called as Caleb reached the door. "Stay in your assigned patrol areas. Section 60 is off your route from now on." Caleb walked to his car, his mind racing. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. Brennan's defensive reaction, the expensive new possessions, the threat to his job. It all pointed to something darker than simple dismissal of his concerns. Through his windshield, he watched as Brennan emerged from the office and walked to his new truck. The vehicle had to cost at least $60,000, far more than a cemetery supervisor's salary should allow. Brennan checked over his shoulder before getting in, a gesture that seemed paranoid, guilty. Caleb started his own car, his former EMT training kicking in again. He'd learned to trust his instincts about people, to recognize when someone was hiding something. Brennan wasn't just dismissing his report. He was actively trying to cover something up. The ghost of Liam Delacroix had led him to discover the disturbed graves. Now, Brennan's reaction confirmed that something sinister was happening at Arlington National Cemetery. The question was, what exactly was being stolen from these veterans' graves, and how deep did the corruption go? As he drove home, Caleb's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Brennan's threats echoed in his mind, but so did the image of Liam's pleading ghost and the disturbed soil of sacred ground. He'd failed to save lives during that apartment fire, a fact that still haunted him. But this was a different kind of rescue. This was about protecting the dignity of fallen heroes and exposing whatever dark scheme was violating their rest. Despite Brennan's warnings, Caleb couldn't let go of what he'd discovered. That night, he parked his car 3 blocks from the cemetery and walked in through a maintenance gate he knew would be unlocked. His heart pounded as he crept through the shadows, staying well away from his usual patrol route. The ghost of Liam appeared almost immediately, as if waiting for him. The spectral soldier's form glowed faintly in the darkness, casting just enough light for Caleb to follow. They moved between the rows of headstones, Liam leading him to a small maintenance shed near Section 60. "I've never seen this used," Caleb whispered, examining the padlock. The metal looked new, unlike the rusty locks on other cemetery buildings. He shone his flashlight through a dirty window and caught glimpses of something that didn't belong. Plastic storage containers stacked against the wall. Liam's ghost passed right through the wall. Moments later, his faint light illuminated the interior, revealing details through the window that made Caleb's blood run cold. The containers weren't filled with maintenance supplies. They held carefully wrapped items that glinted in the ghost's ethereal glow. Caleb took out his phone and started taking pictures through the window. He could make out military medals, ceremonial sabers, and even jewelry, wedding rings and family heirlooms that had been buried with the veterans. Each item was carefully sorted and labeled. "They're not just grave robbing," he muttered. "This is organized. Professional." He zoomed in on one container that held what looked like World War II medals, including several Purple Hearts. Another held Vietnam-era decorations. The systematic organization suggested someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Liam floated back through the wall, his ghostly features twisted with anger. He pointed urgently toward the cemetery office. Caleb followed, staying in the shadows. Through the office window, he saw light from a computer screen. Brennan was inside, working late. Using the skills he'd learned as an EMT to move quietly, Caleb crept closer. Brennan was looking at what appeared to be an online auction site, but not eBay or any platform Caleb recognized. The listings showed military artifacts with starting bids in the thousands of dollars. "Dear God," Caleb breathed, taking more pictures with his phone. One listing showed a Civil War officer's sword with a current bid of $25,000. Another displayed a collection of World War II medals priced at $15,000. The total value of items he could see just on that one screen had to be over $100,000. A car pulled into the parking lot, headlights sweeping across the building. Caleb ducked behind a bush as a sleek black Mercedes stopped next to Brennan's truck. A well-dressed man stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. Through the window, Caleb watched as Brennan greeted the man with familiar ease. They spread papers across the desk, pointing and nodding. The stranger opened his briefcase, revealing neat stacks of cash that Brennan quickly counted. Liam's ghost appeared beside Caleb, pointing at the stranger. The spectral soldier's face showed recognition, suggesting this wasn't the first time the man had visited the cemetery after hours. Caleb's phone quietly captured it all. The money changing hands, the papers being signed, Brennan's animated conversation with his mysterious partner. Though he couldn't hear their words, their body language told the story. This was clearly a regular business transaction. After the man left, Brennan went to the maintenance shed. Caleb watched as his supervisor loaded several of the storage containers into the Mercedes trunk. The entire exchange took less than 15 minutes, practiced and efficient. As the Mercedes drove away, Caleb remained hidden, processing what he'd witnessed. The scope of the operation was staggering. Based on the prices he'd seen and the number of containers in the shed, the total value of stolen artifacts had to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This wasn't just Brennan acting alone. The professional storage, the specialized auction site, the well-dressed buyer. This was an organized operation targeting military artifacts for the black market. Brennan's position as cemetery supervisor made him the perfect inside man, able to identify valuable graves and coordinate the thefts without suspicion. Liam's ghost hovered nearby, his ethereal form radiating a mix of satisfaction and continued urgency. They had uncovered the truth, but proving it would be another matter. Brennan had already shown he would threaten anyone who got too close to his scheme. Caleb checked his phone, making sure all the photos had saved. The evidence was clear: the storage shed full of stolen artifacts, the online auction listings, the cash exchange, and the late-night pickup. Each image helped document the systematic looting of honored veterans' graves for profit. His hands shook slightly as he thought about the scope of what he'd discovered. These weren't just valuable antiques being stolen. They were precious memories, medals earned with blood and sacrifice, personal items meant to rest eternally with America's heroes. Each theft was a desecration, a betrayal of sacred trust. The ghost of Liam Delacroix had led him to uncover something far darker than he'd initially suspected. What had started as mysterious soil disturbances had revealed itself as an organized criminal enterprise, with Brennan at its center and connections to the black market antiquities trade. Caleb took one final set of photos of the maintenance shed in Brennan's office before carefully making his way back to where he'd parked. His mind was already racing, trying to determine his next move. He had evidence now, clear documentation of criminal activity, but he would have to be careful how he used it. Brennan had already threatened his job, and the involvement of black market dealers suggested the stakes could be much higher. Liam's ghost appeared one last time as Caleb reached his car, the soldier's spectral features showing grim determination. They had exposed the truth. Now they had to find a way to stop it. Caleb's hands trembled as he dialed the police non-emergency number the next morning. He had barely slept, the images of stolen artifacts and shadowy deals haunting his thoughts. When the dispatcher connected him to Detective Rita Vasco, he took a deep breath. "Detective, I have evidence of organized grave robbery at Arlington National Cemetery," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm a night security guard there, and what I've uncovered, it's bigger than I can handle alone." There was a pause on the line. "That's a serious allegation," Detective Vasco replied, her tone professional but carrying an edge of personal interest. "I'd like to meet in person. This matter is particularly important to me. My grandfather rests at Arlington." They met an hour later at a quiet coffee shop 3 miles from the cemetery. Caleb watched Detective Vasco's face as she swiped through the photos on his phone. Her professional demeanor cracked slightly when she saw the stolen Purple Hearts. "These items," she said, pointing to a particular container in one photo, "they're from the World War II section where my grandfather is buried." Her jaw tightened. "Walk me through everything you've seen, Mr. Hutchins. Leave nothing out." Caleb hesitated, then decided to tell her the complete truth. "This will sound crazy, but I was led to discover this by a ghost." He described his encounters with Liam's spirit, watching carefully for signs of disbelief. To his surprise, Detective Vasco nodded slowly. "Staff Sergeant Liam Delacroix," she said. "I remember when he was interred. His sister attended the police academy with me, though she later chose a different path. She's a military historian now." "His sister?" Caleb leaned forward. "Could she help us understand what valuable items might have been buried with him?" "Delilah Delacroix," Rita confirmed, already pulling out her phone. "We've stayed in touch. She needs to know about this, and she might have crucial information." Within 2 hours, they were sitting with Delilah in her office at the Military History Institute. Books lined the walls, and medals from various eras were displayed in secure cases. Her resemblance to Liam was subtle but unmistakable in the shape of her eyes and the determined set of her jaw. "Liam was buried with our grandfather's Congressional Medal of Honor," Delilah said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "It was his most treasured possession. Grandfather earned it at Normandy, saving his entire platoon." She looked at the photos on Caleb's phone. "If they've taken that..." As if summoned by his sister's words, Liam's ghost appeared in the corner of the office. Caleb straightened, drawing Rita and Delilah's attention to the spectral figure. Both women fell silent, Delilah's hand covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. The ghost pointed urgently at one of Delilah's display cases, then at a thick book on her shelf about World War II medals. His meaning was clear. He was helping them understand what the thieves were targeting. "You can see him too?" Caleb asked, watching their reactions. Rita nodded slowly, her professional skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. Delilah simply wept, reaching toward her brother's spirit but stopping short of where he stood. "The most valuable items would be medals of honor, Distinguished Service Crosses, and Navy Crosses," Delilah explained, composing herself, "especially those with documented historical significance. The black market for these artifacts is enormous." Liam's ghost moved to Delilah's computer, pointing at the screen. She understood immediately, pulling up a database of decorated veterans buried at Arlington. "This could help us identify which graves are most at risk," Rita said, taking notes. "We need to document everything that's already been taken and protect what hasn't been touched yet." Over the next 2 hours, they cross-referenced Delilah's records with the photos of stolen items, building a comprehensive list. Liam's spirit guided them, indicating specific names and sections of the cemetery they hadn't yet investigated. "The theft of my brother's medal isn't just about money," Delilah said, her voice hardening. "It's desecration. Each of these items represents sacrifice, courage, and loss. They belong with the heroes who earned them." As they worked, Caleb noticed a black car passing slowly by the building for the 3rd time. He moved to the window cautiously, recognizing the Mercedes from the previous night. "We've got company," he said quietly. "Brennan's buyer is watching the building." Rita moved to get a look, her hand instinctively going to where her service weapon would normally be. "They must have spotted us at the cemetery. We need to be careful now. These people have a lot to lose if they're exposed." Liam's ghost appeared agitated, moving between them and the window. His spectral form pointed down the street, then made a gesture like writing. "He wants us to follow but document everything," Delilah interpreted, grabbing her camera. "Just like when we were kids, he always insisted on having proof when we discovered something." "We'll need to be strategic," Rita said, already forming a plan. "They know about Caleb, but they might not realize I'm law enforcement yet. We can use that to our advantage." The Mercedes circled around again, moving slower this time. Delilah quickly saved their research to a flash drive while Rita called for backup surveillance teams. Caleb watched the car finally park down the street, 2 men inside watching the building. "They're not even trying to hide anymore," he said. "They're sending a message." "Then let's send one back," Rita replied, her voice firm. "We're not backing down, and they've just made a serious mistake by threatening a police officer's family." Liam's ghost stood at attention near the door, his spectral features set in the same determination they'd seen in his military photos. He had brought them together, the security guard who needed redemption, the detective with personal stakes, and the sister who understood the true value of what was being stolen. Now they had to prove what was happening before more heroes' memories were desecrated. The Mercedes' engine started again, but this time they were ready. Rita's unmarked police car was equipped with tracking devices, and backup units were already moving into position. Their investigation had shifted from gathering evidence to active surveillance, with a ghost as their guide, and time working against them. The next morning, Caleb arrived at Arlington National Cemetery for his shift, his mind still processing everything they had learned. The familiar weight of his security badge felt heavier than usual as he walked toward the employee entrance. Something felt wrong. The air itself seemed charged with tension. Harold Brennan stood waiting by the security office, flanked by 2 police officers. His face wore a mask of false concern that made Caleb's stomach turn. "Mr. Hutchins," Brennan said, his voice carrying artificial sadness, "we need you to open your locker." Caleb's heart pounded as he followed them to the employee locker room. He could feel the trap closing around him but couldn't see a way out. With trembling fingers, he entered his combination and pulled open the metal door. One of the officers immediately stepped forward, pulling out a small plastic bag containing white powder. "Sir, please step back and place your hands behind your back." "That's not mine," Caleb protested, his voice hoarse. "Someone planted that." "Brennan, you know exactly what this is about." But the handcuffs were already clicking shut around his wrists. Brennan shook his head, playing his role perfectly. "I'm disappointed, Caleb. I had no idea you were struggling with this kind of problem. We'll have to terminate your employment immediately." The arrest happened quickly. As the officers led him out, Caleb caught a glimpse of Liam's ghost standing in the hallway, his spectral form radiating helpless frustration. The spirit pointed urgently at a wall calendar hanging in the break room, specifically at a date circled in red, just 2 weeks away. At the police station, Detective Rita Vasco fought to see him, but was told to stay away from the case due to her personal involvement. Through his public defender, Caleb learned that the drugs had been expertly planted. His fingerprints were even on the bag, transferred from his locker door handle. Delilah visited him the next day, her face drawn with worry. "They're watching me," she whispered across the visitors' table. "2 men in a black Mercedes have been following me everywhere. Yesterday, one of them approached me in the grocery store parking lot." Caleb leaned forward. "What did he say?" "He mentioned my brother by name." Delilah's voice shook slightly. "Said that Liam would want me to let sleeping dogs lie. Then he showed me a photo of my daughter at school. The message was clear." The threat made Caleb's blood run cold. These must be Vincent Torelli's people. Rita mentioned he's a major player in black market antiquities. "Liam is appearing more frequently now," Delilah continued, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Last night he manifested in my study 3 times. He keeps pointing to the calendar, to June 15th. Something significant must be happening that day." Caleb ran his hands over his face, the gravity of their situation sinking in. We need to figure out what's special about that date. Has Rita found anything new? She's been ordered off the case, but she's still digging quietly. The problem is, Brennan and his partners know we're onto them now. They're accelerating whatever they have planned. As if summoned by their conversation, Liam's ghost appeared in the corner of the visitation room. His uniform was crisp as ever, but his expression carried desperate urgency. He pointed first to Delilah, then to the wall clock, then made a digging motion. "More graves," Delilah translated, her historian's mind working quickly. "They're planning something big on June 15th. But what?" The ghost pointed to his chest where his medals would have been, then held up his hands to indicate a large quantity. A major theft, Caleb realized. Something bigger than individual medals. But what could be valuable enough to risk all this? Before Delilah could respond, a guard approached to end their visit. As she stood to leave, she squeezed Caleb's hand. "Rita's working on proving the drugs were planted. Just hold on." But they all knew time was running out. Whatever was planned for June 15th was important enough for Brennan and his associates to take extreme measures to stop their investigation. Later that night, alone in his cell, Caleb received another visit from Liam. The ghost's appearance was clearer than ever, his features sharp with determination. He pointed to his wrist as if indicating a watch, then made a sweeping gesture across the cell's small window. "Time is running out," Caleb murmured. "I know. But I'm stuck in here while they're out there threatening your sister and planning whatever's coming." Liam's ghost moved to the cell wall, pointing to the concrete blocks, then made a motion like a door opening. "I can't just walk out of here," Caleb said. "Even if I could, I'd be a fugitive. That wouldn't help anyone." The spirit shook his head in frustration, then pointed to his own chest where a name tag would be, followed by making a writing motion. Caleb sat up straighter. "Your records? There's something in your military records that could help?" Liam nodded emphatically, then pointed toward where Delilah would be. "Your sister would know where to look," Caleb understood. "But she's being watched. They won't let her investigate freely." The ghost's form began to fade, but before disappearing completely, he made one final gesture, touching his heart, then pointing outward, the universal sign for courage and sacrifice. Caleb lay back on his narrow bunk, mind racing. They had 2 weeks until June 15th. Somewhere in Liam's military records lay a clue to what Brennan and his partners were planning. But with him behind bars, Delilah under surveillance, and Rita ordered to stay away, their options were running out as quickly as their time. Through his cell window, he could just make out a sliver of the night sky. Somewhere out there, sacred graves were being violated, and heroes' memories desecrated. And on June 15th, something even worse was coming. The ghost's increasingly urgent appearances made that clear. Caleb closed his eyes, his former EMT's training kicking in. When a situation seems impossible, break it down into manageable pieces. They needed to prove the drugs were planted. They needed to protect Delilah. They needed to access Liam's records. And they needed to figure out what made June 15th so important. Most of all, they needed to do it all before time ran out. 3 days after his arrest, Caleb walked out of the county jail on bail, thanks to Rita pulling strings with her police contacts. The evening air felt sweet after the stale confines of his cell, but he had no time to savor it. A familiar car waited in the parking lot, Delilah's blue sedan. She rolled down the window, glancing nervously in her rearview mirror. "Get in quickly. They're still watching me, but I managed to lose them for a moment." Caleb slid into the passenger seat, noting the dark circles under Delilah's eyes. "You found something in Liam's records?" "Not here," she said, pulling onto the street. "We need somewhere private." They drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town, choosing a corner booth far from windows or other customers. A tired waitress brought them coffee, then left them alone. Delilah pulled a worn leather folder from her bag. "I've been going through Liam's personal effects, trying to understand what he's trying to tell us." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "The date he keeps pointing to, June 15th, it's not random. The cemetery has scheduled maintenance that day. Several sections will be closed to visitors." Including Liam's section, Caleb guessed, remembering the ghost's frantic gestures. Yes, but there's more. Delilah spread out several documents, military records, newspaper clippings, and old photographs. Liam died saving his entire unit from an ambush in Afghanistan. The enemy had them surrounded, but he created a diversion that allowed his team to escape. Her voice caught. He didn't make it out himself. Caleb reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. He died a hero. He did. And because of that, we buried him with our grandfather's Congressional Medal of Honor. Delilah pulled out an old photograph showing an elderly man in uniform, the distinctive medal prominent on his chest. It was Liam's most prized possession. He used to tell stories about Grandpa earning it at Normandy. Wait, Caleb sat up straighter. A Congressional Medal of Honor? In his grave? Delilah nodded grimly. I've been researching. To collectors, an authentic Medal of Honor from World War II could be worth more than $100,000. More if it has documented history like our grandfathers. The pieces clicked into place. Caleb remembered Liam's ghost pointing to his chest where medals would be. That's what Brennan is after. He's been stealing valuable artifacts from other graves, but this would be his biggest score yet. Delilah's voice hardened. And he's planning to do it when the cemetery section is closed for maintenance. No visitors, no witnesses. As if summoned by their conversation, Liam's ghost appeared beside their booth. His spectral form was clearer than ever, his military bearing proud, but his expression urgent. He pointed to the photograph of the medal, then made a protective gesture. He's been trying to protect his own grave, Caleb said softly. All this time he's been warning us about what's coming, not just showing us what already happened. Delilah wiped away tears. Liam always protected others. Even now he's still standing guard. The ghost nodded solemnly, then pointed to his wrist, their universal sign for time running out. 2 weeks, Caleb said. We have 2 weeks to stop them from desecrating your brother's grave and stealing your grandfather's medal. But how? Delilah asked. Brennan has you fired and discredited. Rita's been ordered to stay away from the case, and I'm being watched constantly. Caleb stared into his coffee, thinking hard. This wasn't just about catching criminals anymore. This was about preventing a sacred trust from being violated, about protecting a hero's final resting place and preserving a family's legacy. We need proof that Brennan planted those drugs, he said finally, and we need to catch them in the act on June 15th. If we can do both, we can stop them and expose the whole operation. Liam's ghost moved closer, his form flickering with intensity. He pointed to Delilah, then made a motion like writing. The maintenance records, Delilah translated. I have access to the cemetery's historical archives. I could check who scheduled the maintenance and when, if Brennan arranged it specifically for this. That would be our first piece of evidence, Caleb nodded. And Rita might be officially off the case, but she still has contacts who could help us set up surveillance. The ghost made another gesture, pointing to his chest, then spreading his hands wide. He's saying there are others, Delilah said. Other valuable artifacts they might be targeting that day. Of course, Caleb leaned forward. They wouldn't close the section just for one grave. They'll want to hit multiple targets while they have the chance. Liam nodded emphatically, then slowly faded from view, leaving them with the weight of what they'd discovered. His own grave was the target, and they had exactly 2 weeks to prevent its desecration. Delilah carefully packed away the documents. I'll start going through the maintenance records tomorrow. Even with them watching me, I can do that without raising suspicion. It's part of my normal work. I'll contact Rita, Caleb said. We need to be ready when June 15th comes. We can't let them take your grandfather's medal, or anything else from those graves. They left the diner separately, conscious of the eyes that might be watching. But as Caleb walked to his car, he felt a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was a mission to protect something sacred, to honor a hero's sacrifice, and to ensure that Liam's eternal watch over his fellow soldiers would not be in vain. The ghost's warning had become clear. Now they had to race against time to prevent the theft and preserve the dignity of a fallen hero's final rest. Caleb, Rita, and Delilah gathered in Rita's small home office, spreading maps of Arlington National Cemetery across her desk. The evening sun cast long shadows through the window as they planned their surveillance strategy. "We'll need at least 4 observation points to cover all potential access routes," Rita said, marking spots on the map with red pins. Her police training showed in the precise way she analyzed the terrain. Delilah traced the maintenance access roads with her finger. "The work crews usually enter through these gates. That's probably how they'll bring in their equipment. They'll need something big enough to move quickly with the artifacts." "I've got 3 retired police buddies willing to help," Rita added. "They're trustworthy, and they've got experience with stakeouts. Plus, they all have family buried at Arlington. This is personal for them too." Caleb studied the marked positions. "We'll need cameras, good ones with night vision capability." His EMT training had taught him the importance of documenting everything. Evidence would be crucial for a conviction. "Already handled," Rita smiled. "Called in a favor from a surveillance equipment supplier. We'll have everything set up 2 days before the scheduled maintenance closure." A cold breeze suddenly swept through the room, making the papers flutter. Liam appeared near the wall, his ghostly form more distinct than ever before. Instead of his usual translucent appearance, he looked almost solid, like a man standing in heavy fog. His face showed clear distress. "Liam," Caleb straightened up. "What's wrong?" The ghost pointed urgently to Rita's wall calendar, then made a pushing motion, as if moving something forward. Delilah's face paled. "He's trying to tell us something about the date." "Earlier," Caleb translated, watching Liam's frantic gestures. "They're moving it earlier." Rita grabbed her phone, quickly dialing a number. After a brief conversation, she turned back to them, her expression grim. "My contact at the cemetery just confirmed it. Brennan submitted paperwork this morning to move the maintenance closure up by 1 week. Says it's due to urgent repair needs." "That gives us only 6 days," Delilah said, her voice shaking. "He must suspect we're planning something." Liam nodded vigorously, then pointed to his wrist, their familiar signal for time running out. His form was so clear now that Caleb could see the worry lines on his forehead, the determined set of his jaw. "We need to move fast," Caleb said. "Rita, can your team be ready sooner?" "I'll make it happen," she replied, already sending text messages. "But we'll have less time to set up our positions, less time to test the equipment." Delilah opened her laptop, pulling up cemetery records. "I'll check if any other maintenance schedules were changed. Might give us a better idea of their full plan." The ghost moved to look over her shoulder, pointing at specific sections of the cemetery map on her screen. His presence was so strong that the laptop screen flickered slightly. "These sections," Delilah noted, marking them down. "All areas with graves of decorated World War II veterans. They're planning to hit multiple sites at once." "A bigger operation than we thought," Rita muttered. "They'll need more people, more vehicles. Which means more chances for us to catch them," Caleb added, "but also more chances for something to go wrong." Liam suddenly turned toward the window, his form becoming agitated. He made a motion like someone watching, then pointed urgently at their cars parked outside. Rita moved quickly to the window, peering through the blinds. Black SUV, 2 men inside. They've been there at least 20 minutes. "Brennan's people," Caleb said. "They're watching us right now." "We need to split up," Delilah said, gathering her papers. "Make it look like a casual visit ending. They can't know we're organizing anything." Liam nodded in approval, then made a series of quick gestures, pointing to each of them, then to different exits. "He's right," Rita said. "Delilah, take the back door through my neighbor's yard. Caleb, wait 15 minutes after we leave, then go out the front like nothing's wrong." They quickly packed away their planning materials, hiding them in Rita's office. Delilah slipped out first, taking a roundabout route to her car parked several blocks away. Rita left next, making a show of carrying grocery bags to appear natural. Alone with the ghost, Caleb waited in the darkening room. "They're moving faster than we expected," he said quietly. Liam's form shifted, his expression both worried and determined. He pointed to his chest where his medals would be, then made a protective gesture. "I know," Caleb nodded. "We won't let them take your grandfather's medal. We won't let them desecrate any of the graves." The ghost's image began to fade, but before disappearing completely, he made one final gesture. A military salute, crisp and formal. The meaning was clear: trust, respect, and a soldier's faith in his allies. After waiting the full 15 minutes, Caleb left through the front door, walking casually to his car. He could feel eyes on him from the SUV but didn't look their way. As he drove home, taking a deliberately indirect route to lose any tail, his mind raced with preparations. 6 days. They had 6 days to reorganize their surveillance plan, position their teams, and prepare to catch the thieves in the act. The ghost's warning had given them a crucial advantage, but Brennan's acceleration of the timeline meant they would have to work faster, smarter, and more carefully than ever. Liam's increasingly solid appearances seemed to signal the approaching confrontation, like his spiritual energy was growing stronger as the moment of truth drew near. His determination to protect his fellow soldiers even after death had brought them this far. Now it was up to the living to finish what his warning had started. The night air hung heavy over Arlington National Cemetery as Caleb crouched behind a large memorial stone, his heart pounding. Through his earpiece, he heard Rita's whispered voice. 3 vehicles approaching from the north entrance. Looks like our targets. The moon cast long shadows between the rows of white headstones, creating a maze of light and darkness. Caleb checked his position one more time, making sure he had clear sight lines to Liam's grave. The sacred ground felt different tonight, charged with anticipation. A cold presence materialized beside him, and Liam appeared more substantial than ever before. The ghost's uniform was crisp and clear, his features sharp enough that Caleb could see the determination in his eyes. Liam pointed toward the maintenance road where headlights were approaching. 2 black vans and a pickup truck rolled quietly into the cemetery, their lights dimmed. The vehicles stopped near the targeted section, and 6 men emerged. Caleb recognized Brennan immediately, directing the others with quick hand signals. The rest were Torelli's crew, professional thieves who specialized in black market antiquities. "They're moving into position," Rita's voice came through the earpiece. "Wait for my signal." The thieves worked with practiced efficiency, unloading equipment from the vans. They carried shovels, metal detectors, and cases for transporting their stolen goods. Their movements showed they'd done this many times before. Liam's ghost suddenly became agitated, pointing urgently toward one of the men. In the moonlight, Caleb saw the glint of a handgun being drawn. His stomach tightened. They'd expected the thieves might be armed, but seeing weapons in this peaceful place felt like a desecration itself. "Rita," Caleb whispered into his mic. "They're armed. At least one visible weapon." "Understood. All units hold position. Wait for them to begin digging." The thieves spread out, 2 men heading directly for Liam's grave. Brennan consulted a map, directing others toward different sections, all graves of decorated veterans. They were going for multiple targets at once. Liam moved closer to Caleb, his ghostly form now so solid that it cast its own shadow in the moonlight. He gestured toward a path between the headstones, a route that would let Caleb flank the thieves without being seen. The sound of shovels striking earth broke the cemetery's silence. Rita's voice crackled. "All units move in. Now." Floodlights suddenly illuminated the area as Rita's team emerged from their hiding spots. "Police, drop your weapons and equipment." Instead of surrendering, the thieves scattered. 2 of them opened fire, bullets striking headstones with sharp cracks that echoed through the sacred ground. Caleb heard Rita calling for backup as she took cover. Liam gestured urgently, and Caleb followed the ghost's guidance, moving through the shadows between graves. The spirit seemed to know exactly where the thieves were heading, leading Caleb on an intercept course. One of Torelli's men appeared suddenly around a memorial, raising his gun. But Liam had already directed Caleb to duck, the bullet passing harmlessly overhead. Caleb tackled the man, his EMT training helping him target vulnerable points. They struggled briefly before Caleb knocked the weapon away and pinned him down. "Got one," he called into his mic as Rita's team moved in to secure the suspect. Liam was already moving again, leading Caleb through the darkness. The ghost's form glowed faintly, providing just enough light to navigate safely between the graves. They could hear gunfire and shouts as Rita's team engaged with other members of the gang. Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. "Get the medal. Don't leave without it." Two thieves were frantically digging at Liam's grave, trying to reach the casket before they were caught. The ghost's form flared with anger at the desecration, his presence becoming almost electric. Caleb moved to stop them, but another armed man appeared, forcing him behind a large headstone. Bullets chipped away at the stone as Caleb tried to find an opening. Liam stood in the open, his ghostly form drawing the shooter's attention. The man's hesitation at the supernatural sight gave Caleb the moment he needed. He rushed forward, disarming the thief with a move he'd learned in EMT self-defense training. Rita's voice called out, "Police! Drop the shovels, hands where we can see them." The two men at Liam's grave tried to run but found themselves facing the ghost. Liam's form was now so solid he appeared almost alive, his military bearing intimidating even to hardened criminals. They froze in shock, allowing Rita's team to take them into custody. Gunfire continued from the other side of the section where the remaining thieves were still resisting. Liam pointed urgently toward a mausoleum, warning Caleb seconds before Brennan emerged from behind it with a weapon. "You've ruined everything," Brennan snarled, aiming at Caleb. "Do you know how much money was at stake here?" Before he could fire, Liam's ghost appeared directly in front of him. The sight of the spectral soldier, a man whose grave he'd planned to rob, made Brennan stumble backward in terror. His gun clattered to the ground as Rita's team surrounded him. "Harold Brennan, you're under arrest," Rita announced, cuffing him as police sirens approached in the distance. "The only thing at stake here was your conscience, and you lost that a long time ago." As the police secured the scene and collected evidence, Caleb surveyed the damage. Some headstones had been chipped by bullets, and several graves showed signs of the attempted robbery, but they'd stopped the thieves before any caskets could be opened or artifacts stolen. Liam stood by his own grave, his form still remarkably solid. He looked at the disturbed earth with sadness, then turned to Caleb with a grateful expression. The ghost's presence had been crucial. His warnings had given them time to prepare, and his guidance during the confrontation had helped prevent any casualties. Red and blue lights flashed across the cemetery as more police units arrived. The sacred ground had become a crime scene, but at least they'd prevented its desecration. The thieves would face justice, and the veterans buried here would rest undisturbed. The victory was short-lived. As the police began securing the scene, a scream pierced the night air. Caleb spun around to see Brennan, who had somehow slipped his cuffs, holding Delilah with one arm while pressing a concealed backup weapon against her temple. "Nobody move!" Brennan shouted, his voice echoing across the cemetery grounds. "Drop your weapons or she dies!" Caleb's blood ran cold. The scene brought back memories of the apartment fire, trapped people begging for help, his inability to reach them in time. He couldn't let another person die because of his failure to act. "Let her go, Brennan," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's over." "Nothing's over," Brennan snarled. He tightened his grip on Delilah, who struggled to breathe. "Here's what's going to happen. Caleb, you're going to take that evidence bag with all the photos and documents you collected and you're going to burn it. Right here, right now." Liam's ghost appeared beside Caleb, his form flickering with concern. The spirit's eyes moved between Delilah and the evidence bag at Caleb's feet. The proof they needed to bring down not just Brennan, but Torelli's entire operation. Gunfire erupted from behind a row of headstones. Two of Torelli's men had Detective Vasco pinned down, cutting her off from backup. "Rita," Caleb called out, but he couldn't move to help her without risking Delilah's life. "Time's running out," Brennan taunted, pressing the gun harder against Delilah's head. "What's it going to be, hero? The evidence or her life?" Delilah's eyes met Caleb's. Despite her fear, she managed to speak. "Don't give him what he wants. My brother died protecting others. I'm ready to do the same." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Around him stood the graves of countless soldiers who had made the ultimate sacrifice for what they believed in. But he remembered the weight of his EMT badge, the promises he'd made to protect life above all else. 10 seconds, Brennan warned. "Then I pull the trigger." Liam's ghost moved closer to Caleb, his presence stronger than ever. The spirit's eyes held no judgment, only understanding. He had died saving his unit. He knew the cost of impossible choices. 5 seconds. Caleb's mind raced back to the apartment fire. He'd hesitated then, trying to find the perfect solution until it was too late. People had died because he couldn't choose quickly enough. 3. Rita's voice crackled through his earpiece. I'm pinned down. Can't get a clear shot. 2. Delilah closed her eyes, accepting whatever came next. 1. Wait. Caleb reached for the evidence bag. His hands trembled as he held it up. I'm doing it. Just don't hurt her. Brennan smiled coldly. Toss it over here. Slowly. Caleb took a step forward, the bag heavy in his hands. Not just with papers and photos, but with the weight of justice for all the graves that had been desecrated. Liam's ghost watched intently, his form rippling with tension. That's it, Brennan said. Now back away. But as Caleb moved, his foot caught on something. Liam's ghost had positioned himself just right, causing Caleb to stumble slightly. The movement was small, but it made Brennan shift his attention for a fraction of a second. That's when Delilah acted. She drove her elbow backward into Brennan's ribs, just as her brother had taught her in self-defense training years ago. The gun wavered, and Caleb launched himself forward, tackling both of them to the ground. The evidence bag flew from his hands, scattering papers across the graves. Brennan's gun went off, the shot going wide. They struggled in the dirt, rolling between headstones as Delilah scrambled away. Caleb grappled with Brennan, using every technique he'd learned in EMT training to subdue violent patients. But Brennan fought with desperate strength, knowing his freedom was at stake. The gun swung between them, neither able to get full control. Liam's ghost appeared directly in Brennan's line of sight, his military bearing intimidating even in death. The momentary distraction was all Caleb needed. He wrenched the weapon away and pinned Brennan face down, pressing his knee into the man's back. It's over, Caleb said firmly, as police officers rushed to secure Brennan properly this time. Gunfire still echoed from Rita's position, but now, freed from the hostage situation, backup officers were able to flank Torelli's men. Within minutes, they were in custody as well. Caleb helped Delilah to her feet. She was shaking but unhurt. I'm so sorry, he began, but she cut him off. You did everything right, she said. You found a way to save both the evidence and me. That's what heroes do. Together, they gathered the scattered documentation, proof of the grave robbing operation that would ensure Brennan and his associates faced justice. Liam's ghost stood watch over them, his form beginning to fade now that his mission was nearly complete. Rita joined them, holstering her weapon. Good work, everyone. We got them all. She looked at the disturbed graves around them. It'll take time to restore everything, but at least we stopped them before they could do more damage. Caleb stared at the scattered headstones, thinking of the lives they represented. Heroes who had made their choices and lived with the consequences. For the first time since the apartment fire, he felt the weight of guilt beginning to lift. Today, he had faced another impossible choice, but this time he'd found a way through it. The night wasn't over, and there would be statements to give and reports to file. But standing there among the graves of heroes, with Liam's ghost keeping silent vigil, Caleb knew he had finally honored both his past promises and the sacred ground he'd sworn to protect. The moonlight cast long shadows across Arlington's sacred ground as Caleb stood frozen, the evidence bag heavy in his hands. Brennan's gun remained pressed against Delilah's temple, while Detective Vasco's desperate situation behind the headstones grew more dire with each passing second. In that moment of crisis, Liam's ghost appeared before Caleb one final time. But instead of pointing frantically as he had done so many nights before, the spectral soldier drew himself up to his full height and offered a crisp, formal salute. The gesture carried the weight of generations of soldiers who had faced impossible choices with courage and honor. Something clicked in Caleb's mind as he returned the ghost's salute. His EMT training had taught him that saving lives always came first. Everything else was secondary. The evidence, though important, wasn't worth Delilah's life. The ghost's unwavering presence reminded him that true courage meant making the hard choices, even when the cost seemed too high. Okay, Brennan, Caleb called out, his voice steady now. "You win. I'm going to put the evidence down, nice and slow." He began lowering the bag, but his eyes caught Liam's ghostly form moving purposefully toward a nearby maintenance cart. Understanding flowed between them without words. The ghost was showing him a way out. "Just set it on the ground and back away," Brennan ordered, his attention split between Caleb and the bag. Caleb carefully placed the evidence on the ground, but as he straightened up, he let his hand brush against the maintenance cart. In one fluid motion, he sent it rolling toward Brennan and Delilah. The ghost's form seemed to merge with the moving cart, giving it an extra supernatural push. The distraction worked perfectly. Brennan instinctively shifted his aim toward the approaching cart, loosening his grip on Delilah. She seized the opportunity, driving her elbow backward just as Caleb lunged forward. "Rita now!" Caleb shouted as he tackled Brennan. The momentary chaos was all Detective Vasco needed. With Torelli's men distracted by the commotion, she and her backup officers caught them in a crossfire. "Police, drop your weapons!" Caleb wrestled with Brennan in the dew-dampened grass, his EMT training giving him an edge in controlling a violent suspect. He could almost feel Liam's presence guiding his movements, helping him avoid Brennan's desperate attempts to bring the gun to bear. "It's over," Caleb grunted, finally pinning Brennan face down and knocking the weapon from his hand. "You're not desecrating any more graves." As officers rushed in to secure Brennan, Caleb helped Delilah to her feet. She was shaking but unhurt. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Liam would be proud. Detective Vasco approached, holstering her weapon. "We got them all," she reported. "And look what we found in their vehicle." She held up a bag containing military medals and ceremonial items, stolen artifacts that would serve as irrefutable evidence of their crimes. "So we didn't need to destroy the evidence after all," Caleb said, gathering up the scattered documentation from where he'd dropped it. "No, but you were willing to sacrifice it to save a life," Delilah replied. "That's exactly what Liam would have done." Caleb turned to where Liam's ghost had last appeared. The spectral soldier stood at attention, his form growing fainter with each passing second. But before he faded completely, he offered one final salute, not just to Caleb, but to all of them who had fought to protect the sanctity of Arlington's grounds. Caleb returned the salute, his heart full. The weight of his past failures felt lighter now. He had faced another life-or-death situation, and this time, he had made the right choice. He had saved a life when it mattered most. "Your brother can rest easy now," he told Delilah as they watched the ghost fade away. "The graves are safe, and justice will be served." Detective Vasco nodded in agreement. "Between the stolen artifacts we recovered and all the evidence you gathered, Brennan and his whole operation are going down. They'll never disturb another veteran's rest." As the police led Brennan and his accomplices away, Caleb looked out over the rows of white headstones stretching into the distance. Each one represented a story of sacrifice and courage. Tonight, he had honored those stories by protecting both the living and the dead. The ghost of Staff Sergeant Liam Delacroix would no longer walk these grounds. His mission was complete. But his final salute had given Caleb something precious: the confidence to trust his instincts and the courage to act when lives hung in the balance. Dawn was breaking over Arlington National Cemetery, casting a golden light across the headstones. Caleb stood a little straighter, finally at peace with both his past and his purpose. He had proven to himself and to Liam's spirit that when it mattered most, he could still save lives. In the weeks following the dramatic arrest at Arlington National Cemetery, the full scope of Brennan and Torelli's grave-robbing operation came to light. Detective Vasco led the investigation, methodically tracking down every stolen artifact and documenting each desecrated grave. The evidence room at the police station filled with recovered military medals, ceremonial weapons, and personal effects, each item representing a violated hero's final rest. Caleb sat in the precinct's conference room, helping families identify their loved ones' stolen belongings. An elderly woman wept as she held her father's Purple Heart, finally returned after its theft. A young veteran trembled as he reclaimed his grandfather's service pistol, meant to be passed down through generations. "You've given us back more than just objects," the elderly woman told Caleb, clutching the medal to her chest. You've restored our faith in humanity." Detective Vasco appeared in the doorway, a satisfied smile on her face. "The DA just called. Brennan and Torelli both took plea deals. They're giving up their entire network. Suppliers, buyers, everyone. Dozens of arrests are happening across 3 states. Caleb nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "How many artifacts have we recovered so far?" 217, she replied. "And we're still counting. The cemetery board is meeting this afternoon about your situation. I made sure they had my full report about your role in breaking this case." Later that day, Caleb stood before the Arlington National Cemetery Oversight Board, his posture straight and confident, so different from the guilt-ridden man who had started this journey. The board chairman, a retired general, addressed him directly. "Mr. Hutchins, your actions have exposed and ended the largest grave-robbing operation in Arlington's history. The false charges against you have been expunged, and we owe you a tremendous debt." The chairman paused, shuffling some papers. "We would like to offer you reinstatement with a promotion to head of cemetery security. We need someone with your dedication protecting these grounds." Caleb's heart swelled. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a calling. Here, among the honored dead, he had found his true purpose. "I would be honored, sir." That evening, after the paperwork was signed and his new badge pinned on, Caleb made his way to Liam Delacroix's grave. The setting sun painted the white headstones in shades of amber and gold. Delilah stood waiting for him, holding a small box. "I wanted you to be here for this," she said, opening the box to reveal her grandfather's Congressional Medal of Honor. "We're returning it to Liam's grave where it belongs. The cemetery's adding extra security measures to protect it." As they carefully restored the medal to its rightful place, a familiar sensation washed over Caleb, that otherworldly chill he had come to know so well. He turned slowly, and there stood Liam's ghost, more clearly visible than ever before. But this time, the spirit wasn't pointing frantically or showing signs of distress. Instead, Liam stood tall and peaceful, his spectral form radiating a sense of completion. His military bearing was perfect as he raised his hand in a formal salute, not just to Caleb but to his sister as well. Delilah gasped softly, tears streaming down her face as she returned her brother's salute. "You can rest now, Liam. Your mission is complete." Caleb also saluted, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Staff Sergeant. I'll make sure they're all protected from now on." Liam's ghost held the salute for a moment longer, a serene smile crossing his transparent features. Then, like mist in morning sunlight, he began to fade. There was no urgency in his departure this time, no desperate unfinished business. The spirit of Staff Sergeant Liam Delacroix had earned his eternal rest, and he took it with the dignity of a soldier whose final duty was complete. As the last trace of the ghost disappeared, Caleb reflected on how far he had come. The guilt of those lost in the apartment fire would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. When faced with another life-or-death moment, he had proven to himself and to Liam that he could save lives when it mattered most. "He's at peace now," Delilah said softly, wiping her eyes. "And thanks to you, so are hundreds of other families who got back what was stolen from them." Caleb looked out over the endless rows of white headstones, each one representing a story of sacrifice and courage. As head of cemetery security, he would be their guardian, ensuring that no one disturbed their hard-earned rest again. Here, among Arlington's sacred grounds, he had found more than just redemption. He had found his true calling. The last rays of sunlight faded from the cemetery as Caleb and Delilah walked back toward the entrance. Behind them, Liam's headstone stood proud and undisturbed, his grandfather's Medal of Honor once again resting with its rightful guardian, protected by those who understood the true meaning of honor, sacrifice, and duty. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.